Hey, everybody, I just want to jump into this. Happy Wednesday. It is a wonderful day because we have the man, the myth, the legend, Phil Chester on out of Portland. He is an incredible wedding, couples, I would say like super cool LA portrait photographer out in Portland, and love his stuff. One, he's just a super cool guy to talk to, and we've known each other for about a year or so just on Instagram, chatting back and forth about health stuff, keto, all kinds of fun things. But I wanted to kind of have him on just because his work is unlike anybody else's that I know, and it's moving in a direction that I think the wedding industry, it doesn't feel the same way, and I love that. And so I always want to just kind of pick those guys' brains and talk to them. So without any further ado, here's the wonderful and amazing Phil Chester. Phil, I have to ask you, what is your favorite? I always start with like a weird question just to throw people off, which I know is terrible interview strategy, but what's your favorite binge or cheat day food or food that you used to love pre-keto?
It's always pizza. It just goes back to pizza. I've tried experimenting with other cheats, whether it be like really good ice cream or just like, there's a place called Milk Bar in New York, which pretty much specializes on maximizing the amount of sugar you can put into an item. Yeah. And it always comes back to pizza. There's a place in Portland called Life of Pie, and it's just insane. It's the most insane thing. So forever and always, pizza will be my one true cheat love.
I love that. We have a Milk Bar here in DC, and you're exactly right. They have this birthday cake milkshake, and I'm pretty sure it's the size of like a grande cup at Starbucks, but I'm pretty sure it's 1,000 calories or more. It's insane. Yeah,
they also have a thing called crack pie. So we watched the Chef's Table on the person who started that, and they're going through it. And I was so inspired. It was just like cool story. And then I was like, let's go. I want to go to our site. And they're like, oh, you can order from New York, and it comes to Portland. So we ordered like everything, including this thing called crack pie, which is literally like brown sugar, brown butter, sugar, and brown sugar shaped into a pie. And it's like you take a bite and it actually hurts you. It's like enjoyable, but it also hurts. So I've had to put that one aside as far as something I can enjoy on a cheat day.
Yeah, you're just like, this is not appropriate. I love that, man. I love watching your fitness journey. So I kind of want to know just about the Phil rundown. You got your photography start in the Army, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I bought a camera in the Army. I wouldn't say, I guess it's like if you consider when, you started photography, it was like, I bought my first like professional camera while I was in the Army. I wouldn't say I was like, oh, that's when I became a photographer. I don't really know when that really was. I guess maybe when I started charging people for it, but yeah, I got a Canon 30D when I was in Afghanistan. I was like, I should probably have a decent camera to photograph some stuff here. And that's kind of what maybe started steamrolling the process of thinking, oh, maybe I could do this.
Sure. No, I love that. It was so interesting. I'd researched a little bit before and kind of saw some other interviews, and I was like, what? This is so fascinating. What was the transition like between Army time and then when you started charging, or maybe I would say now you primarily photograph couples, specifically mostly weddings, I believe. And it's like, what was that transition and when did that happen?
Yeah, super weird. I mean, the Army was just a weird past life. I feel like I've lived a couple of lifetimes already. Yeah, it's like the whole Army thing was like, I did that basically because I dropped out of music school and wanted to go back to college. And I was like selling guitars at Guitar Center one day. And I was like, I should go back to college. All my friends are in college. I feel like a loser. And then I remembered, I was like, I think an Army person came into our like school to talk about something about free college. I don't know. So I just like left my job at Guitar Center, went home, Googled Army recruiter, called them. And I was like, hey, do you guys still give free college away for joining the war? And they're like, yeah. I was like, okay, I'm going to come on in and sign up. And they're like, okay, see you soon. So, and I went in and I was like, what's the soonest I can leave? And what's the minimum I have to do to get free college? And like 3 years. So I was like, all right, let's leave next week. And that was it. There was like no thought behind it. It was just like, let's just do this. I don't know. There was something I was like, you should do this because it's something to do. It's not college, but you'll get free college. Who knows? You're bored and 20 years old. So I did that, and we talk about that forever. But going from that, I got a camera when I was in Afghanistan during my first deployment, and we were in this small little camp in southeast Afghanistan on the border of Iran. And I was attached to special forces. I wasn't an actual special forces soldier because that's insane. I'm too lazy for that. But I was attached to them, which means that we supported them. So there was maybe 20, 30 guys in this little tiny camp. And I was like, I should get a camera. This is it's like actual G.I. Joes. They have fully automatic grenade launchers attached to four-wheelers. And I was just like, what? Why do you need that? Who are you? Transformers? Who are we fighting? This is so insane. It was just the craziest thing. So I got a camera. And then a couple months in, we found out that National Geographic was coming to our camp to do a documentary on the Special Forces. And they didn't have a photographer. They had an audio guy, a producer, and a videographer. So I put together this really cheesy slideshow in iPhoto with M83 as the music, and it's so embarrassing to think about now. And I showed it to them. I was like, "Hey guys, I've been taking some photos from around here." And they're like, "Well, we can't do anything and promise you that we'd use them, but if you put them on a CD burning days, we'll credit you for using them." And they end up using all of the photos. There's 20 photos in the documentary. And it was just kind of more of an ego boost of anything. I'm like, oh man, this at the time I was like, this is as cool as it gets. People from National Geographic wanted to use the photos. So it was kind of oh, maybe I could do something with this. And then fast forward, did another deployment in Iraq, super sucked, got out, went back to college because I was like, oh, that's what you're supposed to do. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. What pays good? Something in medicine. I like sports medicine. I'll do that. No idea. Zero idea why. And when you're 25 years old and you've been deployed to 2 different war zones and you're sitting in a reception with 18-year-olds and they're talking about college chemistry, you're just like, I don't give a shit about this. What am I doing? Yeah. So it's really weird. And then my friend one day, I'm 3 months into college, my friend calls me and he goes, hey, we're filming a documentary. We're going to take the first female paraplegic to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, and we need another photographer to shoot it. Do you want to come? And without question, I just dropped out of college and went and did that. So that's that my entire time in the Army was so I could go back to school for 3 months. And after that, it was just kind of trial and error of I was like, I got to do something with a camera. I think everyone's journey kind of starts with taking photos of friends, taking photos at, in a pit at a concert of your favorite bands. You want to try band photography. You want to try model stuff. I did senior portraits. I even got a weird job shooting yearbook photos for a company. That was super weird. It was a 4-month thing where you just go around to all these schools and you shoot. You're the yearbook photographer.
Right, you're the guy.
These brats that don't want to pose with a camera. And I got to the point I was just I don't even care. This is what you get. This is how you're going to be represented for the rest of your life. And did that. And then I think eventually, like most people who get into weddings, their friend asked them, and one of my friends said, hey, I'm getting married. I'd never done a wedding before. But I was like, sure, how hard could a wedding be? And found out very quickly, delivering 40 photos that were terrible. They're good at the time. If that person is listening, this is back in 2010. You found out very quickly, oh, this is hard. And this is a job. And then that just kind of steamrolled into shooting more, and I just kept with it. And, I saw some people who were doing really cool stuff, and I was like, man, I want to do this. So just kept with it. And then here we are.
I love that. It's one, I can't get this out of my head. Hi, I'm Phil with Lifetouch. What's going on, guys? Just going around to all the yearbook stuff. And the Kilimanjaro gig, that's incredible. That makes sense though, because if you had your camera and kind of even just as a hobby or getting attached to it during this kind of just an intense time, good or bad or whatever, and it's another intense opportunity comes where you're like, that sounds badass. Why wouldn't I go to Kilimanjaro and help photograph and, see somebody succeed, which is really cool. And it's kind of related to, you've always been kind of into medicine and the body and stuff like that. And you get to see somebody succeed, which is cool. So I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking that for you, but I think all that's connected. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, man. It's one of those things that I've always been a really impulsive person, and I don't overthink think it's too much. So if there's like some sort of opportunity that arises, it's like, well, when will I get a chance to do this again? So, just kind of jumped on it.
Yeah. Were you always from like the Portland area, or where are you originally from?
No, I'm from Columbus, Ohio originally. Was born and raised there, and then I moved out to Portland in 2012, and probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. Also an impulsive decision, but yeah.
That's what everybody from Portland tells me if they're not from there. I have family that lives in Beaverton, and they've been there, 50 years. And but everybody I know who's kind of like our age is like, no, I just wanted to move there. It seemed like a cool city. And versus like New York City, it's a cool city, but you go for work, or you're like, no, I want to get a specific job that caters to the New York City, only happens there, or LA. Right. Whereas Portland, it's like, no, it just seems cool. Like, that's where I want to be.
Yeah. I mean, embarrassingly enough, like I was thinking about, so I was in Ohio, and I was like, I had a wedding in Seattle, and I was like, what am I doing in Ohio? Like, this is insane over here. I want to move to Seattle. So I was planning on moving to Seattle, and then I started researching. I was like, oh, there's like a lot of photographers in the Seattle area, but at the time there weren't a ton in Portland. And right around that time, Portlandia season 1 came out. And it like literally sold me on the city. Like the little 30-second intro with the Washed Out song was like, this is it. It was like this like weird religious calling almost of like, because at the time it was just, I had never seen a show like that. I didn't really know anything about Portland. And I felt like the show, it like glorifies the city by like with the exaggeration. It's like exaggerated stereotypes of what the city's like. And I was like, this is it. This is where I want to go. And I just chose here, and it's been great ever since.
I love that. You saw like put a bird on it, and you're like sold. I don't know what that means, but I'm into it.
I owe my life to Fred Armisen and Carrie Brampton, which interestingly enough, I had a lot of dreams about both of them. And just I have dreams about me hanging out with people that like I want to be friends with. So I have a lot of dreams. I had like, there was like a month where I was just dreaming about hanging out with Fred and Carrie all the time. And I was like Fred's assistant, but I had to go do something. In dreams, it's always so weird. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I'm hanging out with Fred Armisen. He's like, hey, will you go get this thing for me? And then all of a sudden I'm like driving a car, and I'm like drowsy, and I don't know where anything is. And I was like, where am I? And I'm supposed to be doing this chore, and I can't find the thing, and it just never ends up working out. Or I had a bunch of dreams about LeBron James for a while, where like I made it onto the Cavs or made it onto the Lakers, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta play a game. But like, it's like my imagination isn't creative enough to imagine me playing it in an actual NBA arena. So it's like in a high school like basketball court with the Lakers, because I can't like imagine, I can't even fathom myself being on a stage like that. So this is a dream. This should be like the maximum amount of creativity. And it's like, no, we're gonna put you in a high school court.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're eating pizza, but you still have a 6-pack. And nowadays you're like, no, that cannot happen at the same time.
I know.
I love that. So speaking of self-doubting dreams, when did things start clicking for you? Once you shot that first wedding, it went, solid for the first time, but you're like, all right, I need to get better. When did things start clicking, even just financially, where you're like, you might not necessarily shooting everything that you're shooting now, but you're like, oh, okay, I can make this my full-time gig? Or did you overlap? Did you have just like did you go back to Guitar Center in Portland or something?
No, I kind of went all in with it. Like when I was like year 1 in Ohio, year 1 of going full time, I quit my job. I was working at the Apple store at a mall.
Yes.
Which is like the best, coolest retail job you can have is working at Apple. Because generally you're working with other creatives, and everyone's kind of has like a little side hustle they're working on. So it was a cool place to board off of.
That was my first start too. I worked at an Apple store in 2008 in Philly, and it was on the first iPhone. So it was like exactly what you said. We had all creative guys. I owe my freelance like drive to working there with a bunch of cool ass people. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it was
it was awesome. Like it was a ton of like musicians or other just creatives, and it was just cool to be in like a room with. That's all we talked about. It's just like what people were working on, stuff like that. So it's cool. So I quit my job at Apple and went full time. Just kind of like impulsively, I was like, I think I can make enough. And I think I was shooting like a wedding a month, maybe. I mean, actually for year 1 was fun. There was like maybe 6 weddings I shot, but I was also shooting some like freelance video work for a company. It was kind of just like these interview based videos for companies to help them rebrand us through some other video company. And then after that, like year 2, I was like, I need to move because I had the wedding in Seattle. I was like, I need to move out of Ohio. And I had nothing booked in Portland. I didn't know anyone in Portland. And I had enough money for 3 months just in case things didn't work out. And I just like hit the ground running. I was like, if this is going to work, I need to like put myself out there. I put like an ad, a full page ad in an Oregon Bride magazine, and I had a designer do it. I invested quite a bit of money in like trying to set myself up for success. And it turned out that more of it was just meeting people like, like, hey, I'm a person and I just moved here and I do photos. Like if you ever need anything, let me know. Or if you want to work on something, let me know. And that was probably the best thing I did. And then from that, like, I think maybe not until year 3 or 4 is when work became a little more steady and I didn't have to like, I wasn't in that like freak out. Like I need to make this work. It was pretty much just based on getting weddings featured on some wedding blogs. So at the time that was like, if you get a wedding featured in a big wedding blog, then you're going to book up, a good amount for the next year. It was a pretty good turnaround for that.
Right. You're just rolling around in money. If you get featured, you're like, yes.
I mean, that was the idea. I mean, I wish that was the truth, but unfortunately it's not. It was, but at the time it was like, it was kind of like, oh, good. This should hopefully turn into leads. Like nothing's ever a guarantee in this business, but, 4 or 5 years ago, if you got on green wedding shoes, and because, at the time they'd just post like 1 or 2 posts a day. And that was kind of where everyone was going back in the days where people would like go to your blog post and comment on it. And there's a ton of interaction driving to your site. It was a pretty good bet that you book something out of it.
Right. No, absolutely. The good old days before,
I know.
Instagram engagement was something we all had to talk about over coffee. You're like, what is happening here?
I know, like it's a real world problem.
Yeah. So one of the things I was, through my research and I was kind of reading about you was just this kind of transition either out of or getting better at dealing with the idea of just self-doubt, and I don't know if that's work-wise or personal-wise or both. What was that process like, and how much has self-doubt played kind of in your life and your career? Like, do you still struggle with that now? And then, or does it just look like a different flavor, if you will?
I think it's probably more of a different flavor. I think early on, I always go back to, and it's not fair to go back to it because it doesn't translate to a lot of people, but I always go back to anytime I'm feeling like, I might feel like, oh, this is hard, or like, I'm not good at this kind of thing. I go back to like, oh, I was in the Army for 4.5 years. So nothing will ever be as bad as that. So that was kind of like my baseline of like, this is as shitty as life can get. So if you have any other life quality above this, you're doing good. So as far as like self-doubt, it's like, oh, this doesn't work, or like, I'm not making enough money. It's like, oh, it could always be worse type thing. So I'm always, trying to keep things in perspective as far as like, where am I? Like finding things to be appreciative for. And that immediately elevates my mood and elevates my self-confidence. But of course, like the longer you do this and the harder you try, like the bar for what is good, like whenever you shoot like what you think is like your best work, then that becomes the new standard. And then anything that you think falls under that feels bad because it didn't reach this certain expectation at a certain level of what you deemed as like, this is my best stuff. And that bar keeps going up higher and higher every year. So as far as, self-doubt goes, it's less about, like, oh man, I don't trust myself, or I'm not good anymore. And more like, okay, I just need to find different ways to like rejuvenate my creativity and to find a different angle of how to look at this. It generally comes in when I've been doing the same thing for too long. And it's something I can recognize now, but I think earlier on, it's more just like, it can be a pretty big stress of thinking like, oh man, I'm just not getting good clients, or my work's like stagnant, or I'm not booking enough. Like, a lot of those things can creep in. And just knowing how to deal with those stressors and in really healthy ways can, is like probably like what will keep you afloat and doing anything in life, let alone wedding photography.
Right. Do you think because I know I can speak for myself, but I assume the same for you. When people are first starting out, the amount of gigs that they're taking is not a lot, per se. It's at least it's not steady, right? And so hopefully they're also progressing in their craft, but they're also progressing in business. And so it's like, all right, and again, you're a musician, I'm a musician as well. And it's like, all right, well, next week we learned a harder song and we shot, a better photo, or
Right.
we did better in a harder situation. But now, when we have steady businesses, things are going well. What is that is it unhealthy to like, I think mentally it's a fun thing to say, like, oh, I always want every shoot to be better than the last. And that's a good goal, but I wonder if that's, it sounds like I want every year to be maybe better than the last, or because if you shoot 20 clients in a year or maybe 30 clients or whatever, that's going to be tough, just to try and have that progression the whole year. But at the same time, like you said, you don't want to be stagnant or doing the same thing. Like, so what does that look like kind of in a short-term mindset for you? Do you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think like my overall goal is to like reflecting every 6 months or reflecting every year and be like, is my work better than it was last year? And if it is, then good, because the first thing they have to know is that this progress of getting better at anything in life is probably a slow progress. Like when you're first starting out, first couple of years, you make massive progress. And I think the same thing goes across any trade, or even like health-wise.
Yeah.
When you first transition from eating a garbage diet to eating anything else, you're going to like feel incredible. You're going to lose a ton of weight. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, progress. This is easy. And then after that, you kind of plateau a little bit. So then the progress gets a little harder. So for me, I generally like to keep it loose and reflect every 6 months to a year, look back on the work. And it's not like somebody has to sit down like, oh, I'm going to reflect on my last year. It's more like, oh, I'm looking for something to post. And I just kind of notice like, ooh, like I like the work I made last year more than I like the work I made years prior, or it's more technically dialed in, or like I'm getting my compositions are stronger, or I like the connection between the couple a lot more. And on the short term, it's not like, oh, I need this session I shoot to be better than everything I've done before. It's more like every session I shoot, I'm picking up on something. I'm picking up on a different way to deal with a certain kind of personality, or a certain kind of lighting scenario, or, oh, when I'm in this situation at a wedding, it'll be better to do this next time. So Sarah and I have a lot of conversations kind of like after we have shoots or after we have weddings about like, oh man, this thing, I kind of struggled with this, but now I know going forward that if I ever come up with a situation, I'm going to handle it a lot better. So we're always kind of doing those kind of self-reviews and not just being like, oh, that was hard, and not really addressing it. I'm just talking about like, oh wait, how can I make this better? So always keeping that in mind is a good way to kind of keep slowly progressing. And it could be on a small level, like, oh man, I've never come across this kind of personality type before. I've never talked to somebody like this before. So it was really interesting to see how they responded to the way I normally guide a session, and how to kind of cater to that. So with every experience in life and every experience shooting new people, you're going to pick up on something, and it's just how you process what you're picking up on that I think makes you improve or stay stagnant. That makes sense.
No, it does make sense. It's one of those things too with our businesses. It's not because we're the boss, but we're also the person, executing the majority of the work. It's like we don't have I'm sure there's probably a type A photographer out there who does like a performance review every quarter on themselves,
right.
Like very officially. But we never do that really, or at least we don't put that into our business. And maybe that's something to put in. But yeah, that's the big thing too. Is just like anytime you come across something different throughout just working in general, and it's like, hey, this part sucked. At least for me, my number one thing, shooting, obviously I want to like be able to problem solve that way. But it's like, if there's like a client issue, I'm always like, oh, I could have communicated this even more. And, it's their first time doing this and it's my 200th time doing this or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there's always opportunity to, improve and help out. And like, hey, should I phrase this question differently in email just to like help them understand better what's going on?
Yeah, emails are tricky because you realize that like when you get an email, you read it in a tone that you think that if like a client's asking for something, you might read like, oh my gosh, they're so upset at me. They hate me. They hate the photos. And really, they're just curious they have a regular question. So like, I think making sure that when you're reading emails and also when you're sending emails, like thinking about like, how is this going to be perceived? Does this come off? So I'm always generally like overly lighthearted, and I try to remember that like, hey, text, emails, anything that is text-based and internet-based can be perceived horribly. So you just got to be really mindful of that. And if anything, if there's any kind of client misunderstanding, just hopping on a phone call immediately. That's the thing. It's just like most people just want to avoid the phone. But for me, it's kind of the first thing I go to is like, if you can talk to a person and hear their voice, it's just like you immediately humanize the situation. And that generally helps with anything.
Right. No, totally. That makes sense. That's your first thing to go to. You're like, all right, yeah, I'm just going to talk to them and be what's up. And it makes sense. So like if you can, a lot of wedding photographers I know, at least our age, maybe they haven't been married yet and gone through a wedding process. And then once you go through it, you're immediately like, oh, your empathy level raises real high. And you're like, okay, they did not mean this when they sent this email. You know, we're reading it because we had a bad day or a bad workout or whatever.
For sure.
No, that makes sense. I want to talk about I feel like there's this thing, and you've probably heard this tons of times, especially when you go to workshops or you go to the East Coast or you get these emails. And when people see work like yours or Sarah's, or even like Ben Heisch, you know, his work as well, this Pacific Northwest, also, I would say, you know, LA, very stylized, very cool, you know, I don't think I've ever had one of my grooms wear even a hat in a session, you know, whereas which it's not a big thing, and it's never those particular things. I feel like a lot of photographers, and they ask this question of like, Phil, where do you find these clients, or how does that even work? You know, like they're always so stylized, and I don't know if you just want to like set the record straight, but to me, and I think we both know this, I'm like, those people just live in Portland and then they found Phil, but maybe there's more to it. And also too, one thing I noticed is like on your Instagram, every image, most of them that I saw, at least recently, aren't you know, wedding images primarily, and it's mostly couples in like these big connected moments, and it's all kinds of lighting styles, which is super cool. But one, just like, how did you step into that? And you just said, you know what, I'm only going to show like these particular moments. Like I've never seen, I don't even think I've even seen like a ceremony moment from you on Instagram, which is totally fine, right? Like that's your brand choice. So I want to know kind of a little bit more behind like the Phil mindset between like the kinds of couples, what you show, and what's that, you know, that mental filter, not to make an Instagram joke, when Phil's like, oh, I don't actually post these on Instagram. It doesn't really seem valuable either for actual Instagram or actual for, you know, the brand, if you will. I even hate using that saying.
No, it's totally fine. No, it's a great question. I think like in the past couple of years, just like being self-critical and being like, just like you have to talk, there's always like the pressure of like wanting to show like, we don't have to be so literal. Like what my biggest thing that I hate in movies is when they have to over explain the plot. If you watch like any movie trailer from like the like late 80s, early 90s, there's like generally a voiceover that's like explaining the entire movie to you. And they're like, oh my God, I get it. Like almost the original Blade Runner is terrible. I mean, it's like campy and good, but they're like over explaining every single step of the process. Like his character is just like, oh no, you know, it's explaining everything that the guy's doing. That leaves nothing to the imagination. So in showing work, I like to think of like Instagram as like, I don't have to show a first dance. I don't have to show the first kiss at a ceremony. I don't have to show a ring exchange or like photos of bride's shoes on some steps for people to know that I shoot couples and shoot weddings. I'll sprinkle in some, you know, wedding portraits here and there that I'm really excited about. But for me, the way I treat like my advertising, which is what all social media is, I think that's a better way to look at it, is this is how you're advertising yourself. Unless I don't feel like I owe anything to people who I've shot before to show them online. I give them photos, and that's the experience they get, and that's the product they get. And then everything I post online is how I want to be seen, how I want to brand myself. And most importantly is like, I want to show the work I'm excited about. If I'm not excited about a photo, I'm not going to post it just for the sake of like, oh, I need to remind people that I know how to do a ceremony. Because people like, you know, if they're on my Instagram feed or on my website, they're going to know within 2 seconds that, oh, you shoot couples. Oh, here's some wedding photos. If they scroll once, they'll know. And the way I've been approaching like just like the work I'm really trying to push forward and put out there is just like, I want to show work that I really like looking at. And I heard some musician, I can't remember who I was listening, because I'm really curious about songwriting and the whole process of it. And it's so funny when you like look into other other crafts or other mediums of creativity. And because I've been asking a lot of musicians like, hey, how do you start writing? Like, what do you do? And it's the same answer with wedding photography. It's like, know what you like and dissect what you like and understand why you like it. And then try to make stuff that sounds like the stuff you like. And I was like, oh, it's the same thing. No, I want a different answer. Cause it's like, I know that already. So I've been trying to just make photos that like I dig. So for me, it's like finding, always being inspired and having a goal of like, oh, I want my work to feel like this kind of stuff. And looking through old Bruce Davidson books, I think that's insane. We were just, Sarah and I went to Pals the other day and just went through the photo book section and found his book. I didn't even know who he was. I was texting our friend Ryan Muir. I was like, you ever heard of Bruce Davidson? He's like, yeah, it's a Magnum photography. He's like world famous. Big deal. I was like, I don't know. I know.
Yeah, any Magnum person is going to be solid.
Get us baby photos. That's the only photographer I know. And he has this whole series on like the Brooklyn gangs, and there's always like badass photos of just like, they might be a couple, they might be friends, but just the way they're shot, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so refreshing to not just see like the stuff you see on Instagram, the same old thing. So in, making that switch from what I would do before, it was just kind of nervously post wedding photos to remind people of shooting weddings. I think when people are scrolling through feeds or looking through websites and they just see the same thing over and over again, where it's like, oh, it's obviously an elopement photo, or it's like a ceremony shot. Like, I think it just gets caught in the mix of what everyone's doing. Not that it's a bad thing to do that. You can do literally whatever you want with your life. I just think for me, I want to put out photos that I like. And a lot of the times they're not wedding photos, but I love doing weddings. I actually got a inquiry 2 days ago, and the bride, it was so reassuring and so confirming to like, cause you never know. Cause sometimes you're like, I'm going to put out stuff I like. It's like a band. I imagine like a band, they come out with a hit record. Everyone loves it. And then like, they're like, all right, let's do another one. I was like, man, I don't want to do that stuff anymore. I want to try something new. And then like, you're going to hit like a way more narrow of an audience, and people are going to be more close. Like, oh, I like his old stuff more. I like this new weird stuff. So you're putting yourself out there. But this bride, she said like, hey Phil, like, and they're getting married at this cool venue. There's this cool New York couple, and they're like, I really like your work. We're asking friends for recommendations. We wanted someone who was more of a portrait photographer, who did kind of just cool portrait work, but also enjoyed doing weddings. I was like, oh, that's like the best way to describe kind of my style. It's like, I enjoy doing weddings. I'm not obsessed with weddings. I like doing them, but I really like shooting this kind of stuff. So I feel like there's a target audience for people who are into that stuff. There's a target audience for everything. And I think just being really confident in knowing what you like, and if you're putting out stuff that you're proud of, then you're going to attract people regardless.
Preach it, Phil. No, that's what I think is like, people don't understand it. And we can even just use the musician analogy. It's like, never was there a time before where, because we were talking about kind of seeing the same stuff all the time. And, for guitar or for piano or vocal, like the first, I was in choir, and then I did like all state choir in high school or whatever. And like the first piece that you learn as a bass 2 or whatever is this like Italian piece called Say Nail Ben. And it's what every male vocalist learns in classical music. It's like the first thing. Well, get on the game, Phil. No, I was kidding. I know. And again, too, it's probably like systems of teachers, right? Where it's like a whole chain. And for these, for those musicians, it's like, and I'm sure it's the same now because there are Instagram famous guitarists, but it's like, we didn't get to watch everybody playing their practice, if you will, or we didn't get to watch everybody, leveling up each week, as whereas like when I went to college, I went to school for guitar, and it's like, most of the time you would only find out what I'd been working on come recital time, right? My final product, once every 6 months, we get to see what Adam's working on, what Phil's working on, whatever. And now, and it's good strategy, it's good marketing, we're businesses, and then we do like iterate in public, but it's like, you can definitely see the process of a lot of people who, at least when I meet them and I talk to them, they're just scared to be themselves. They have that self-doubt that we talked about, and we've all thought that, like, oh, I should probably, show this on my Instagram to make sure people know that I know how to do this. And I kind of want to just tell them, like, guys, I promise you, post your next 9 photos. If you make them all things you want to shoot and they're still kind of related to the actual business, like things will be better for you. I promise. Like you'll feel more fulfilled. And I don't know.
And knowing that I might not do that well, like the stuff that my film couple stuff never does as well as like certain, Iceland wedding photos. And I know that, and I know it takes time for things to catch on. It's like, I remember I shot like an in-home session, like back in right when I first moved to Portland, like 2013. I hadn't really seen a ton of them done, and no one really understood it. No one really was like digging it. And then it became a thing like 4 years later. And then, like same thing with this, is just like, just knowing that if you're putting yourself out there and putting stuff out there, that's not, what you see everywhere else, like just know it probably won't do that well, and you're going to feel bad about it. Like that's regardless. It's a dopamine releasing application, and we judge ourselves based on how many likes things get. And it's like, just like typical to talk about like, oh, social media, and like, don't get yourself worth from it. But, we kind of do too. Like it feels good when a photo does really well, and you're like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't post most of this stuff because it doesn't do as well. But you just have to come back to the fact that it's like, if you really, really like it and you like it more than other photos, then put it out there and be proud of it. I think that's another thing too, is like people are scared to be proud of their work. They like, if you really like something, put it out. I always, I think it's kind of an unattractive quality to put something out there, but I don't know, I tried something, I don't know if I'll do this. Like just being like, no, I made this thing and I really like it. Like be proud of it. You made it. Like don't kind of hide behind it and give yourself an excuse for why other people might like it, saying like, oh, I don't know if I even like this, the kind of, just self-doubting personality when putting out your work, because this is your business too. It's not just yourself. So be proud of it, and just know that it might not do as well as stuff that might be more universally accepted.
Right. No, 100%. It's like when people, even doing that in-home session. And again, I was going to ask you this coming up is kind of like what's next, but it's like, we watch people transition all the time, to a new style of work. And I've known some photographers that I respect for being super bold. They used to be, we'll use these kind of generic photography terms, but they used to be kind of a light and airy photographer, and kind of, everything they shot was like what you would expect. And then the dude had a change of heart, 2 or 3 years in the business, and was like, screw this. This is not what I care about, and this is not what I like. And just switched his style up. And watching, just the evolution of him, like, I think he deleted like his entire feed and just started fresh. And, it's like if McDonald's changed their colors to, purple and orange or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's super scary, right? And the people that were following you for other reasons, yeah, it might be tough, and the people that were interested in you might kind of transition away. But at the same time, from an artist and fulfillment perspective, it's like, that's the right thing to do. Like, you don't want to gain the whole world for selling your soul while, shooting things you don't like. And I know for me, this is one of those things where one of the things I wanted to ask you about was like, when did it feel, and is that now, where you feel like things click more than they ever have before? I feel like for me, the past 2 years, maybe 3 years, I got those emails similar to you, but for me, it was, Adam, I love your reception stuff, which nobody talks about in weddings. Like nobody gives a crap about what's happening there.
Where did you see that at?
Yeah, exactly. And it was like this combination of like these couples that want to party and they want to have a good time, and they, even I always tell my non-religious couples, I'm like, just because your wedding's non-religious doesn't mean it's not sacred. Something's happening for one time only, and if that
someone's
means
getting baptized.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether it's me or someone else, we're going to baptize somebody.
Exactly. Yeah, they're getting baptized. Yeah, there's going to be a Kendrick Lamar song on, and you're getting baptized. And no Cupid Shuffle is like very much my couples are like, no, we don't. I've had some couples where the entire reception was just instrumental music, and I was like, this is amazing and just weird.
Instrumental Cupid Shuffle.
Yeah, not what I meant, but yeah. And so like getting into that groove, where I'm just attracting. Like my big branding, if I had a cheesy brand thing, it would be colorful photos for colorful people. And I've just been leaning into that and attracting that. And it's been so nice to just dive in. And I think it feels like we're clicking. And I don't know if I'm there now, but I feel like we're close to having our largest groove, if you will. And so I want to talk to you. Do you feel like you're there now, and that's where you've been the past few years? And then how do you plan to kind of iterate or innovate, over the next year? And I know that'll be kind of another I word, but incremental. What does that look like for you?
I never feel like it's clicking. I feel like every year is like a huge hustle. Like, it's like, I wish it was just like, oh, cool, Coast Zone. Like, I've put in the work in the last 7 years of doing this, and now it's like, oh, things are easier. It's like, they're easier from a technical standpoint. Like, I'm getting better, not getting better. I'm closing the gap of like figuring out how to make photos that I am drawn to more and more. I'm still really, really, really far away from being able to do it how I want to. And I think that gap will never close. And I think it's like a good place to be in a business, especially if something that's like a creative service. I think like over time, like my clients, like I don't really shoot many weddings in churches. I don't really shoot many indoor dark reception type areas. And generally, are either cool venues or more outdoor spots. So it's like, cool, I'm going to attract a little bit more of that. So every year it's like a little more dialed in as far as like the people that come to me, but it's like nowhere close to what I would want it to be. So I think approaching every year as this like, all right, like if it's just so competitive, I think you can't get stagnant or complacent in this industry when it's just like the bar for entry is so low. Like, you just get a camera, and then, especially if you've never shot a thing before, then it's great, because if you're really, really creative and have a good eye and you've never shot a wedding before and never seen weddings, you can come in with a whole fresh perspective and change the game. And then everyone's obsessed with that person's style, and it rattles the industry a little bit. So I think I'm always trying to look ahead and think of like, okay, what are other people not doing? And then also more importantly is like, what am I most attracted to, and go after that. So I feel like clicking as far as like maybe like understanding I'm not wasting my time during sessions shooting the photos. I think that I know like, oh my gosh, why am I spending so much time doing these kind of photos? I'm wasting time in the session when I could be working to get these other images that I really want to make. So things like that, just kind of figuring out a better workflow. And that's always evolving and always changing. And my taste is always changing. So it's just a never evolving beast. I don't think it'll ever like click per se, because while it is a business, I think I approach the business as a business. So I don't like get all my self joy out of it. But at the same time, it's always evolving as far as like, the stuff we make now might not be cool in 4 years, or maybe that'll be the standard, like who knows, but always just kind of trying to look forward and think about like, okay, what's everyone doing? Okay, I'm going to go the opposite route, or I'm going to shoot this in a way that resonates more with me, that I'm not seeing that much of online.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, no, I think too is if I could kind of refine what I was thinking about now, hearing your perspective, it's like the idea of, again, going back to musician analogies, it's like, what album is Phil touring on right now? And so, kind of is kind of the more mindset, what album or season, and it's like, oh, it kind of, we talked about like certain artists that are really known for a certain album to certain people. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, all right, that's the groove. But then you're like, all right, well, my next iteration of work is going to be a little bit different, maybe vastly different. And so what does it look like practically when you kind of mentioned, and I know there's a lot of photographers that talk about like, hey, when you see everybody zigging, you should zag. What does it look like practically for you just actively deciding to say, I want to shoot this differently? One, is that just instructing the couple, your subject differently? Is that kind of having like a styled shoot and trying something out and then using that in the portfolio? And then I want to ask you, just because I know you get this question all the time at your workshops, is just like, how do you communicate to your couples at least for the photos that we see on Instagram, where it's like a little bit more moody. Sometimes they're like insanely happy, but sometimes it's more stylized, and sometimes it's more, it looks like everything was intentional. How does that process work, man?
Yeah, I think to answer kind of a couple of questions, I think the way that, and it's like not a satisfying answer. It's not like do this and get this. It's more like being easier with myself and being easier on the session puts so much less pressure on everybody. Whereas before, my approach in a session might be like, okay, I'm going to go in. These are the photos I want to get. These are the things I'm going to say to the couples to get them to do these things, and nothing else matters. And then you realize that A, that's exhausting. B, that almost never works. And sometimes, it's good to know cues for couples. It's really, really important to, when you get them into a good position, like what could you say to get the reaction you want? Like, it's good to know those things. It's also good to know how people fit together. So you can know, oh, this photo, they look kind of awkward together. What would I change? And if you don't know what to change, you just kind of bail on it, and then you're unhappy with the photo. So knowing how to work those things matters. But overall, my approach to like shooting couples now is just to be as laid back as possible, and just to talk about whatever they're interested in, find something that they're into, that they get excited talking about, and just run with it. And if they don't have something they want to talk about something that you're super into. So for me, I'll talk about podcasts I listen to that I'm just like, blown away by, or just some new research on something I looked up, or some movie I saw I'm obsessed with, and just talk about it. Because people, when they are shooting with you, especially if they're not professional models, even professional models, so like everyone gets nervous in front of the camera. It's the actors do. I recently shot this couple, and the girl is an actress, and she was in some new X-Men movie or show coming out, and the guy wasn't a model. He's a drummer, and they're the sweetest people. But for her, I was like, oh, you're an actress, you're on camera all the time. And she was super nervous to shoot photos, and then super nervous to shoot like couple stuff. So like, it's not like it's easy for anybody. But I think coming into it with an understanding is like, hey, we're just going to take some photos. It's going to be super chill. And being like a friend and acting like, oh, this is no big deal. And taking that business hat off of like, I'm running a professional service for you. Here's what we're going to do. And just being more laid back. It makes the couples more susceptible to relate to you. And then their guard goes down over time. Just not taking it that seriously. I don't try to do the soup. I used to do the whole like, all right, now I want you to like think about a time when you guys first met. I want you to reach out your hand and feel the pulse. I just don't do that anymore, because it's intense and awkward for 99% of people. So my approach now is just to be super laid back, be as in touch with myself as possible. I think that is kind of an understated goal, or something to work on, is people and people don't really think about it, is working on how comfortable they are in their own skin. Because I think it shows. I think when you are not comfortable with your own personality, you're fighting against the grain. You're trying to be a personality that you aren't. You want to be this kind of bubbly, fun person, but inside you have something else going on, or opposite. You want to shoot really, really moody stuff, but you're just a giggle box, and you're like the most lighthearted sweetheart in the world. Like people can read that, and they're really perceptive of that, so that they know if your personality is not who you are on a day you're shooting, they're going to feel like, oh, we're not getting the real version of this person. So I think just being really, really comfortable with who you are, and there's so many ways to get more in touch with yourself. That the more you do self-work like that, the better and easier it is to come down to a more human level around any personality. And I think that's the biggest thing in working with people, getting really cool poses out of people, is not putting too much pressure on yourself. And at the same time, knowing really, really detailed the kind of work that you like. So then you can kind of cultivate these moments within people, know when it's good, and then know when to tweak it, and know when to move on to the next thing. So it's a huge big picture thing. But I think for me, the biggest improvement I've seen in work is when I've kind of taken a step back and be like, oh, let's just like hang out and let's be more chill, but not like, oh, let's be so chill, let's just hang out on a couch. It's, there's a mix of like, I'm still professional. I'm still constantly thinking about how am I going to make this a cool photo.
Right. I love that, man. Dude, so I want to get you out of here. What is next for you? I know you're excited about getting married, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, married.
What else is next for you, man? What's going on? And professionally, personally, I know you're huge on health, obviously. So what's next for Phil?
Yeah, I mean, just continue to like work on my health. Like my biggest goal in life is to age well and to not get Alzheimer's. I read some terrifying study that like by the time you're 65, like 1 in 3 men develop signs of Alzheimer's. I'm like, nope, don't want that. So always continue to work on that. It's a huge priority in my life. Now that I'm 34, going on 35 this year, it's just like you realize really quickly once you hit your 30s that you're not as flexible as you were before, and just certain things you have to actually try.
Yeah.
to feel, you have to try to feel good, and it takes a good amount of work. So just putting Sarah and I just are doing it together, and it's something that's awesome. We're always educating ourselves on new research on health and something like that. It's just a passion of ours, and just cooking together, working out together, and just trying to live an awesome balanced life where we're not like in the gym every single day. Like it's just not our main focus, but it's become a part of our lives, and a good rhythm. So that's always something we're kind of working on. Working on some cool educational stuff for this year. We got some big projects in the works, some new editing presets we're gonna be dropping this year. And then just like working on our home, trying to keep things in perspective and not make life all about work, and getting better at work, and just reminding like, oh, we got to make sure we live a life. And so we always have we're always working on finding a more balanced work-life balance, which we do a pretty good job of. I think we put in maybe 3 hours work a day before we relax. Like, all right, that's enough. In the off season, that is once the wedding season's here, it's as you know, insane.
Mass chaos.
Yeah. So I mean, that's our plans as of now. Just work on our house. We have an Airbnb that is ready to go, but we have to wait for an inspection to come by.
Yeah.
So we can get that place listed on Airbnb and have that going. And just all kinds of stuff. Working on music. I'm trying to finish a song, which is really hard to do. It's so hard because you're so self-critical. It's the same thing as starting in photography. Like, you make a thing and you're like, oh, this isn't as good as the thing I want. And instead of just working on it and putting it out there and be like, oh, I finished one, I'm starting over all the time. Like, oh, what's a better progression? That's so typical to go to that. It kind of sounds like, or I'll write a melody and like, oh, damn it, that's already a song. Yeah, or it's like 100%. Kind of like a song, and there's like, is it? I don't know. And then so get stuck in a lot of little self traps with that. So trying to work on music, and
I love it.
That's do my thing.
Yeah, with songs, it's similar. Like we talked about photography, it's like when you pick up your camera, you almost want to take away all the images you've ever seen, other than the ones you enjoy, and make something yourself. But music wise, like especially to musicians, you're gonna dive into music. Like, you've heard a ton of music. Maybe you go out to like this jazz club on a Thursday night, and you're like, crap, I totally need to rewrite this song. And you're like, oh, it's exactly like what we saw. This is not good at all either.
Yeah, you write a song and it's like, oh, this is just Stairway to Heaven, and then you're like, I'm brilliant. I just wrote Stairway to Heaven on my own. Yeah, but it's already a song. Like, that sucks. But also, I wrote it too. Can't two people write the same song just from two different perspectives? I think that could probably happen.
Oh,
I wrote the exact same song. It's an iconic song. I just wrote it later and without knowing.
Yep, season 3 of the OA. Songwriters writing the same song, but outside of themselves.
I mean, eventually, like, melodies got to overlap, right? Eventually, there's only what, 8 notes.
13 notes. In the West, there's not a lot of options for folks in the West. I love it. Well, dude, thanks so much for coming on, and I love everything you do, man. And it was so good to meet you at Workshop. And next time I'm in Portland, I'll say hey and say what's up to you guys, and wish you guys well, man.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me on. This is awesome.
Awesome, man. That was so good. You're
Thanks.
A pro.
Thank you.
You're like, duh, I get interviewed every day.
I was listening to this podcast called Freedom right before we got on, so it got me in a good podcast mood.
Oh, what is that? I'm going to write that down.
It's so good. I've been listening to more. I've been really into these like improv comics lately. My AirPods might die, so if they do, I'm sorry.
No worries. I'll let you go real quick. But
Lauren Lapkus is like an improv comedian. Her Ben Schwartzman, Thomas Middleditch. Thomas Middleditch is the main star of Silicon Valley.
Okay. Yep.
Ben Schwartz
and the Verizon guy. Yeah.
Yeah, the Verizon guy, and they're just like the funniest people on earth. So I looked up all the podcasts that they were on. And then Lauren Lapkus, who went to the same improv school as them, she's got 3 different podcasts, but there's one called Freedom. And it's just like her and 2 guys, and they just kind of like bullshit and talk about stuff, but they're so witty and super funny. And it's like a nice, because most of the time I'm listening to like, cutting edge science on mitochondria podcast, and it gets pretty boring after a while. So nice to switch it up with ones that are a little more lighthearted.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, dude, thanks so much again. It means so much that you said yes to this, and hopefully it was fun, and just talking about self-doubt and creativity, and punching fear in the face. And awesome, man. Have a wonderful day. And tell Sarah I said what's up. Hopefully sometime we'll get her on, and I'm about to hit my next like big weight goal, so I'll send you an update when that happens.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good.
Awesome. See you, Phil.
All right, bye.
I know I say this all the time, but it was incredible talking with Phil, just kind of about the deep stuff, going through self-doubt, going through starting, beginning, changing, iterating, changing things. Like, that is so important. And we just never talk about all that stuff. Like, we literally just talk about Instagram following, and we just talk about your website, and we talk about getting clients, and all those things are really good. But I think being fulfilled in your work and pushing through the doubts that you have and being okay with yourself before you're in a shooting situation or a client situation, I mean, that stuff is priceless. So absolutely love Phil's perspective on that. Give him a follow on Instagram. I love all his presets, and his workshop stuff is super good. I know a lot of people have benefited even when they've done just classes at other workshops. So he's the man. Definitely go check him out and say hi. And I will catch you guys later. Keep being awesome. One quick thing of note I want to let you guys know about is our Patreon. Obviously, you're like, what is this Patreon thing? We are putting some content on there, and it is awesome. We've got all kinds of things from workflow videos happening. I'm putting up how I blog, everything. And just like the Bearded Talk, it's just another way for you guys to see what's under the hood of other photography businesses. That's the main goal, just so it can help you learn, kind of talk about the stuff that nobody else wants to talk about, and you can just dive in. So thank you guys so much for everything. Keep being awesome.